Welcome to the Alcoholics Anonymous Big Book Workshop. In this episode, recovered alcoholics break down the basic text of Alcoholics Anonymous line by line. Find out more at ladiesbigbook.com. Thank you for listening.
We're in Bill's story. All right, so let's talk about the setup of the big book. We have spent all of these Roman numeral pages talking about some of what this book's about. It's here to give you a solution to and action steps for solving your alcohol problem if you're a chronic, hopeless alcoholic like me. Meaning you have a body that means that when you do drink, you can't control the amount you take. And you have a mind that's so obsessed about alcohol, you have no sanity around whether or not you drink one day to the next. It's like you have a body that makes sure you can't safely drink because you don't know how much you're going to drink. But then you have this mind that keeps telling you, no. Your body's fine. You can drink. And you keep believing it and you keep drinking it, right? So up until this point, they basically told us that this book is going to give you a solution to a practical program of action that works. And that they've had this book for 80 years now, and they haven't changed it for a reason. And it's the Program of Recovery of Alcoholics Anonymous. So we're still we've gone through 32 pages, step one. And we basically covered the body part and some of the spiritual solution. We're going to go through Bill's story now, which is in here for self-identification and also to show another really big part of alcoholism, which is that once you have it, it's just going to get worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And when you read it, it's really important to not think about how is this guy different from me. But if I look at it and I think about what is similar, I am this guy. This is me, 100%. So I look for things that are like, which ones are things that I've done and which are things that I haven't done yet. And then I'm like, oh yeah, no, that is me. And it shows how alcoholism progresses. And that's basically what I have the joy of covering today, of how bad it gets. And then Nina gets to take over and tell you about the good stuff. So isn't Nina lucky? All right. Bill's story, chapter 1. War fever ran high in the New England town to which we new young officers from Plattsburgh were assigned, and we were flattered when the first citizens took us to their homes, making us feel heroic. So it's World War I, and all of these soldiers were like allowed to stay in these people's home before they sailed for the war. And everyone was like, awesome, you're soldiers. And then Bill, who's like, kind of had a rough childhood and never felt like real, like he wasn't unpopular. He was good at like sports and everything that he tried, but like he always felt uncomfortable in his own skin and he had some real sad stuff happen to him. He was like, oh, all of these people love me. So here was love, applause, war, moments sublime, intervals hilarious. I was part of life at last. And in midst of the excitement, I discovered liquor. So happy. And he's great. And now I get to drink, right? He says he forgot the strong warnings and the prejudice of my people concerning drink. So some people in his family had issues with alcoholism. In time we sailed for over there. I was very lonely and again turned to alcohol. So World War I was like real messed up. Like trench warfare means like you're sitting in a trench, just shooting at other people, and they're just replacing everybody who's dying. Over and over. Like people are just dying. And this is the war that Bill's in, right? I was very lonely and again turned to alcohol. So alcohol is like, it's not like Bill had depression problems and that's what caused him to drink. And don't get me wrong, like Bill had depression problems and he talks about that in the chapter. He got happy and he drank. And he got depressed and he drank. And that I can relate to. So we landed in England. I visited Winchester Cathedral. Much moved, I wandered outside. My attention was caught by a doggerel on an old tombstone. So that's the stuff written on a tombstone. Here lies a Hampshire grenadier who caught his death drinking cold small beer. A good soldier is never forgot, whether he dieth by musket or by pot. So a soldier who died by drinking. Ominous warning, which I failed to heed. So he just caught this thing that had warned him, basically, like he's going to die from drinking at this church. So they end the war. He comes back to the U.S. So 22 and a veteran of foreign wars. He's very proud of this. I went home at last. He fancied himself a leader, for had not the men of my battery given me a special token of appreciation. They hadn't given him a token of leadership. They hadn't given him an award. They gave him a token of appreciation. And he's like, my talent for leadership, I imagine, would place me at the head of vast enterprises for which I would imagine I would manage with the utmost assurance. And I'm like, oh my God, I was so like that at 22. That was me. I was that obnoxious. I was probably worse, actually. So at least Bill had fought in a war. I just went to college. I saw somebody just lose it right there. Okay, I took a night law course and obtained employment as an investigator for a surety company. The drive for success was on. I proved to the world I was important. Yeah, tell me about it. I moved to New York and I was just whatever, I'm going to do it. And I did for a while. I just kind of I didn't have a job. I didn't know anybody. I didn't have a place to live. And I got those things, right? My work took me about Wall Street, and little by little, I became interested in the market. Many people lost money, but some became very rich. Why not I? Of course, this is what an alcoholic would say, right? Oh, yeah, you could lose everything, but it won't happen to me. I studied economics and business as well as law. This guy's triple majoring because he can. Potential alcoholic that I was, I nearly failed my law course. At one of the finals, I was too drunk to think or write. So he did finish law school. He never picked up his degree, which I just I failed an entire year of college. I could have had it all wiped from my transcript, and I never did. I shit you not, but I did actually finish school. I graduated. I don't know how I managed that, but I did. It took me 4.5 semesters, but I did graduate. So, though my drinking was not yet continuous, it disturbed my wife. We had long talks where I would still her forebodings by telling her that men of genius conceive their best projects when drunk, that the most majestic constructions of philosophic thought were so derived. So some of you hear that and you think, oh my God, this guy is so obnoxious, I want to punch him in the face. And some of you hear that and you're like, I so have said something like that. And some of you hear that and you're like, God, he's so obnoxious, but then you have said something like that. It's just not so elitist. It's I am better at this thing that's going to make us money when I'm drunk. I'm better at X when I'm drunk. I am a better person when I'm drunk. Right? I mean, I know I'm less bitchy when I'm drunk. But the problem is I easily sail past that to not functional. But by the time I had completed the course, I knew the law was not for me. Yeah, because he fucking failed it because he was drunk. So I would do stuff and I wouldn't be able to do it well because of my drinking. And then I'd be like, oh yeah, obviously it's because it's not right for me. And I need to do something else. So glad I found that out. So I can make better life choices. The inviting maelstrom, so maelstrom's a really bad storm of Wall Street, had me in its grip. Business and financial leaders were my heroes. Out of this alloy of drink, I'm just imagining Bill being that guy. I don't know if any of you have ever dated online, but you'll run across a guy on like the online dating who will have like Bill Gates as his personal hero or like Jeff Bezos as his personal hero. And you're like, oh, I can't go out with you. And I'm imagining Bill as that guy. Okay, business and financial leaders were my heroes. Out of this alloy and drunken speculation, I commenced to forge the weapon that one day will turn in its flight like boomerang and all but cut me to ribbons. The story that everybody likes to talk about at this point is how determined Bill was as a kid to be the best at everything. Like he played, I think, the violin, and he was like, I'm going to be the best at the violin. So he was. And then we got real into like Aboriginal stuff and learning about different cultures. And his grandfather, who raised him, because like literally his dad left, and then his mom was like, I can't be tied down by this kid. I am going to go to college, and you guys can take care of him. Which, by the way, this was in the 30s. So just think about that for a second. And went to Boston and went to school and left the kid with her parents. So Bill was raised by his grandparents. And his grandfather was like, nobody in North America has been able to make a boomerang. So Bill spends all this time trying to make a boomerang and eventually makes one out of planks of wood from his grandfather's headboard that works. Okay, so he made a boomerang. Living modestly, my wife and I saved $1,000 and went into certain securities, then cheap and rather unpopular. I rightly imagined that they would someday have a great rise. I failed to persuade my broker friends to send me out looking over factories and managements, but my wife and I decided to go anyway. So they're basically what Bill's trying to do is like all these people were investing in stock markets, in like businesses through the stock market, and they had no idea how healthy the companies actually were. Seems reasonable. Everybody thought he was crazy. So he had developed a theory that most people lost money in stocks through ignorance of markets. I discovered many more reasons later on. He's talking about his drinking. So they give up their jobs. Off we roared on a motorcycle, the sidecar stuffed with a tent, blankets, and a change of clothes, and 3 huge volumes of the financial reference service. Our friends thought a lunacy commission should be appointed. Like, forget the they like the boomerang crap. Let's talk about the willpower for this. Everybody's telling him he's crazy. They have no money, and they're doing it anyway because they think it's a really smart idea. This guy is like, if anybody can do something he puts his mind to, it's Bill Wilson, correct? Perhaps they were right. I had had some success at speculation, so we had a little money, but we once worked on a farm for a month to avoid drawing on our small capital. They literally had to bathe in an icy lake that they had to break the ice on top of. That was the last honest manual labor on my part for many a day. We covered the whole eastern United States in a year. At the end of it, my reports to Wall Street procured me a position there in the use of a large expense account. The exercise of an option brought in more money, leaving us with a profit of several $1,000s for that year. For the next few years, fortune threw money and applause my way. I had arrived. Okay, watch this ego right here. My judgment, so his thoughts and his brilliance and ideas were followed by many to the tune of paper millions. It wasn't Bill's millions, but as far as he's concerned, it was. It's like anything he can grab to make his ego bigger, he's grabbing. The great boom of the late 20s, it was seething and swelling. Drink was taking on an important and exhilarating part of my life. How much fun. This is like my whole 20s. There was loud talk in the jazz places uptown. Everyone spit in the thousands and chattered in the millions. Scoffers could scoff and be damned. I made a host of fair weather friends. Oh God, this was like all of my 20s, except like way grosser. Maybe it was like that for him, but he didn't put that in the book, and thank God, but it was just awful. My drinking assumed more serious proportions, continuing all day and almost every night. Okay, so I was in my 20s and I actually didn't drink all day. But the remonstrances of my friends terminated in a row and I became a lone wolf. There were many unhappy scenes in our sumptuous apartment. So he's basically like a lone wolf, right? He's lost his friends. And I don't know if any of you ever like ditched your friends and started over because you thought maybe they were going to call you on your drinking or you were going to have to drink less around them. Sucks, right? So that's what happened to Bill here. And then there had been no real infidelity, for loyalty to my wife, helped at times by extreme drunkenness, kept me out of those scrapes. In 1929, I contracted golf fever. We went at once to the country, my wife to applaud while I started to overtake Walter Hagen. Liquor caught up with me much faster than I came up behind Walter. So Walter is supposed to be like the Tiger Woods of that day. I began to be jittery in the morning. Golf permitted drinking every day and every night. So we're starting to notice, like, they move out to the country. If you've ever tried to move somewhere in the hopes that you drink less, that's a little like the geographic cure. He's starting to get jittery in the morning. I thought like my shakes were like a medical condition or like I had low blood sugar. I really thought that. Drinking permitted, golfing permitted drinking every day and every night. I would take up hobbies that allowed me to drink acceptably all the time. If you've ever done that, that was my favorite part. It was fun to carom around the exclusive courts, which had inspired such awe in me as a lad. I acquired the impeccable coat of a tan, which one sees upon the well-to-do. The local banker watched me whirl fat checks in and out of his till with amused skepticism. Abruptly, in October 1829, hell broke loose in the New York Stock Exchange. So that was when like the big bubble of the stock exchange just burst, and all of a sudden everybody was broke. The banks closed, like people couldn't access their money. It was really, really bad. And what we're going through right now is way different from what happened then. But right now, we're not close to what they went through then. Just FYI. After one of those days of inferno, I wobbled from a hotel bar to a brokerage office. It was 8 o'clock, 5 hours after the market closed. The ticker still clattered. I was staring at an inch of the tape which bore the inscription XYZ negative 32. It had been 52 that morning. This is one of the stocks that he actually owned stock in. So that's an 80 drop. And I think he lost like a lot of money in that one stock. But I don't know the exact figure. And somebody told me it in a meeting, so I'm not going to tell you it like it's a fact because I'm not sure. I was finished and so were many friends. The papers reported men jumping to death from the towers of high finance. So that disgusted me. I would not jump. So here, to note, talk about the progression of alcoholism. The goal of alcoholism is for you to die, one way or the other. And sometimes the way you die is through suicide, depression, feeling worthless, like your life's not worth it, and then you die by your own hand. He's not there yet. He went back to the bar. My friends had dropped several million since 10 o'clock, so what? Tomorrow was another day. As I drank, the old fierce determination to win came back. So it's still kind of working for him. Like I would get like something bad would happen and then I would drink and I would feel like, oh great, I can handle this. Like, and then I'd be able to come up with a plan. And then I would get wasted. And then I tried to do the plan and the plan wouldn't work because I was drunk. Because like if you send emails while you're drunk, it's just not going to go well. Just to know. And if you've ever tried, don't do it. Wait until you're sober. Next morning, I telephoned a friend in Montreal. He had plenty of money left, and I thought I'd better go to Canada. By the following spring, we were living in our accustomed style. Nina, I'm going to go until 10:35, okay? Because we started late. I felt like Napoleon returning from Elba. No St. Helena for me, but drinking caught up with me again, and my generous friend had to let me go. This time we stayed broke. Okay, so 2008, 2009, the Great Recession. I lost my job. And they were like, oh, you're getting laid off, da, 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 da. But like the truth is, like, I was the weak link because of my drinking. Like, I'm going to be the first person they're going to lay off in my department. And I remember when I got sober, I'm like, I've never gotten fired for my drinking, blah, blah, blah. Well, nobody tells you that for a number of reasons, because there are legal issues involved and it's uncomfortable. People do all kinds of things to avoid confrontation and uncomfortable conversations. And trying to talk to you about your problem drinking is like number one on the uncomfortable conversation list. So, sorry. But if you're an alcoholic like I am, you have probably been let go of a job because of your drinking, even though somebody has never told you that. So I got let go, and I had opportunity after opportunity after opportunity that I could never seem to grab hold of because my drinking just got worse. And I had before that, I had worked as this sort of governor, like on a van or whatever that you rent from U-Haul, keeping your speed down. Like if you rent a van from U-Haul, you can't go over like 55 or 60 because they have a governor on your speed. So I had work as a governor. And then once I got laid off, I didn't have a governor, so I could get drunk all day, every day. And then when I tried to work again, it was like I couldn't put the governor back on. And I was hosed. And Bill gets opportunity after opportunity, and he can't take advantage of it. And they talk about this in the doctor's opinion. He's like, I don't think these people have a problem with willpower or mental issues, or this is a behavioral issue. He's like, I've seen a lot of people, get put together favorable things, and then a day or so before the event or the deal or the job, take a drink, and then they can't make it because the craving that comes from the allergy is bigger than their mental control. This isn't a behavioral issue. If I drink before that appointment is to be kept, that job is to be gone to, that date is to be met, that allergy will set off a craving beyond my mental control. And I have this obsession that tells me that won't be the case. And it happened to me over and over again, and it's going to happen to Bill. So it happened to him in Canada. All right, so we went to live with my wife's parents, so that sucks. I found a job, then lost it as a result of a brawl with a taxi driver. That's got to be a pretty bad fight. He wasn't at work. How did he lose his job because he got into a fight with a taxi driver? Was it in front of the job? Did the taxi driver go to the job? Did he get arrested? What happened? Mercifully, no one could guess that I was to have no real employment for 5 years or hardly draw a sober breath. My wife began to work in a department store, since she went to work at Macy's, I'm pretty sure. Coming home exhausted to find me drunk, I became an unwelcome hanger-on at brokerage places. Liquor ceased to be a luxury. It became a necessity. So we're going from jittery in the morning golfing to I'm not suicidal to not able to get and keep a job to liquor not being a luxury, it's a necessity. Bathtub gin, 2 bottles a day, and often 3, got to be routine. Sometimes a small deal would net a few $100s, and I would pay my bills at the bars and delicatessens. Not give his wife money who's working at Macy's, right? This went on endlessly, and I began to waken very early in the morning, shaking violently. So no longer jittery in the morning, now he's shaking violently. A tumbler full of gin followed by a half a dozen bottles of beer would be required if I were to eat any breakfast. Nevertheless, I still thought I could control the situation, and there were periods of sobriety which renewed my wife's hope. So he could keep himself sober for a little bit of time. Gradually, things got worse. The house was taken over by the mortgage holder. My mother-in-law died. My wife and father-in-law became ill. Then I got a promising business opportunity. Stocks were at the low point in 1932. I had somehow formed a group to buy. I was to share generously in the profits. Then I went on a prodigious bender and the chance vanished. He had agreed with this group that he advised that if he got drunk, he would receive no profits. And then he was handed a bottle of alcohol that he had not tried before, and he got drunk. Because he was like, well, I've never tasted this before, so I'll try it. Shortly afterward, I woke up. This had to be stopped. I saw I could not take so much as one drink. I was through forever. Before then, I had written lots of sweet promises, but my wife happily observed that this time I meant business, and so I did. Shortly afterward, I came home drunk. There had been no fight. Where had been my high resolve? I simply didn't know. It hadn't come to mind. Someone had pushed a drink my way, and I had taken it. So that's the mental blank spot, right? Where was I crazy? I began to wonder if such an appalling lack of perspective seemed near being just that. Renewing my resolve, I tried again. Some time passed, and confidence began to be replaced by cocksureness. I could laugh at the gin mills. Now I had what it takes. One day I walked into a cafe to telephone, because cafes get you drunk. Like, this is like a Chili's, right? In no time, I was beating on the bar, asking myself how it happened. As the whiskey rose to my head, I told myself I would manage better next time, but I might as well get good and drunk then, and I did. The remorse, horror, and hopelessness of the next morning are unforgettable. The courage to do, this is how it gets worse and worse and worse, right? So he's almost at like the jumping off point. My brain raced uncontrollably, and there was a terrible sense of impending calamity. I hardly dared cross the street lest I collapse and be run down by an early morning truck, for it was scarcely daylight. An all-night place supplied me with a dozen glasses of ale. My writhing nerves were stilled at last. A morning paper told me the market had gone to hell. Well, so had I. The market would recover, but I would not. That was a hard thought. Should I kill myself? Not now. Then a mental fog settled down. Gin would fix that, so 2 bottles and oblivion. So he's still not suicidal, but hang on. The mind and body are marvelous mechanism. Mind endured this agony for 2 more years. Like, I went through this battle of trying to find enough alcohol, a little bit of food, a pack of cigarettes, and how to make it through the day for like 2.5 years after I got laid off until I got sober. And it was the worst. There was a dent in my bed. I don't know how I made it. I should have died, no question. The mind and body are marvelous mechanisms, for mind endured this agony 2 more years. Sometimes I stole from my wife's cylinder purse when the morning terror and madness were on me. Again, I swayed dizzily before an open window or the medicine cabinet where there was poison, cursing myself for a weakling. There were flights to the city, from city to country and back, as my wife and I sought escape. Then came the night when the physical and mental torture was so hellish, I feared I would burst through my window, sash and all. So he's actually suicidal at this point. Somehow I managed to drag my mattress to a lower floor lest I suddenly leap. A doctor came with a heavy sedative. Next day found me drinking both gin and sedative. This combination soon landed me on the rocks. People feared for my sanity. So did I. I could eat little or nothing when drinking, and I was 40 pounds underweight. And he is actually dying of alcoholism. And now I will hand it over to Nina. Thanks, guys.
Cool. All right. So my brother-in-law is a physician, and through his kindness and that of my mother, I was placed in a nationally known hospital for the mental and physical rehabilitation of alcoholics. Under the so-called Belladonna treatment, my brain cleared. Hydrotherapy and mild exercise helped much. Best of all, I met a kind doctor who explained that though certainly selfish and foolish, I had been seriously ill bodily and mentally. Right. So now he's at the hospital, and you know, he got the best treatment. This Belladonna treatment was the best treatment, and he's saying that it helped. And then he met this doctor who ends up being Dr. Silkworth, that is telling him that he is actually sick bodily and mentally. And so it relieved me somewhat to learn that in alcoholics, the will is amazingly weakened when it comes to combating liquor, though it often remains strong in other respects. My incredible behavior in the face of a desperate desire to stop was explained. Understanding myself now, I fared forth in high hope. And so here he's, saying he's learning everything that is essentially in the doctor's opinion, and he's saying, now I understand myself. Now I understand what my problem is. This doctor has told me that my will is weak when it comes to combating liquor. I've got an illness. It's in the body and it's in the mind, and now I understand. And so now he says, I fared forth in high hope. For 3 or 4 months, the goose hung high. I went to town regularly and even made a little money. Surely this was the answer, self-knowledge. But it was not, for the frightful day came when I drank once more. The curve of my declining moral and bodily health fell off like a ski jump. After a time, I returned to the hospital. This was the finish, the curtain, it seemed to me. My weary and despairing wife was informed that it would all end with heart failure during delirium tremens, or I would develop a wet brain, perhaps within a year. She would soon have to give me over to the undertaker of the asylum. And so he went off and he did a couple of months, and he was making money and things were better. And he was convinced that he understood his problem. Self-knowledge was the answer. But obviously that didn't work, because he ended up back in the hospital. And they're telling his wife, like, this guy's not going to last. Like, he's going to need to be locked up, and he's basically just going to lose his brain. They did not need to tell me. I knew and almost welcomed the idea, right? And that was this, again, because what Kat was saying earlier, like, alcohol is going to kill me. And I am to the point where I don't want to live anymore. Like, I am welcoming this idea of being done with this torture. It was a devastating blow to my pride. I, who had thought so well of myself and my abilities, of my capacity to surmount obstacles, was cornered at last. Now I was to plunge into the dark, joining that endless procession of sots who had gone on before. I thought of my poor wife. There had been much happiness after all. What would I not give to make amends? But that was over now. No words can tell of the loneliness and despair I found in that bitter morass of self-pity. Quicksand stretched all around me in all directions. I had met my match. I had been overwhelmed. Alcohol was my master. So here, he's kind of starting to, like, really feel that the baffled by alcohol. I mean, he is starting to really see that this is, not working. And he's also got this self-pity, right? So he's, like, starting to actually feel sorry for himself, bummed that, like, he's not going to be able to fix his marriage and make things better now. But he is seeing this powerlessness, right? He's saying alcohol is my master. And what a master is something that directs everything, right? Like, so alcohol told me where to spend my money, told me who to hang out with, told me, what I would be doing when I was drunk. And that's exactly what we've seen with Bill. So trembling, I stepped from the hospital, a broken man. Fear sobered me for a bit, right? Fear sobers me for a little bit. I start to get some understanding and hear some stories, or really start to see, what has happened. And fear kind of keeps me sober for a bit. But then came the insidious insanity of that first drink. And on Armistice Day of 1934, I was off again. Everyone became resigned to the certainty that I would have to be shut up somewhere, or would stumble along to a miserable end. How dark it is before the dawn. In reality, that was the beginning of my last debauch. I was soon to be catapulted into what I like to call the fourth dimension of existence. I was to know happiness, peace, and usefulness in a way of life that is incredibly more wonderful as time passes. And here he's kind of giving us a glimpse of, what happened, right? He's been telling us about what it was like before, and now he's about to tell us what happened. And so near the end of that bleak November, I sat drinking in my kitchen. With a certain satisfaction, I reflected there was enough gin concealed about the house to carry me through that night and the next day. All right, this is familiar. I'm always making sure that I have enough. And he's like, I've got enough gin here for the night and then tomorrow. My wife was at work. I wondered whether I dared hide a full bottle of gin near the head of our bed. I would need it before daylight. My musing was interrupted by the telephone. The cheery voice of an old friend, and this is Ebby, asked if he might come over. He was sober. It was years since I could remember his coming to New York in that condition. I was amazed. Rumor had it that he had been committed for alcoholic insanity. I wondered how he had escaped. Of course, he would have dinner, and then I could drink openly with him. Unmindful of his welfare, I thought only ever capturing the spirit of other days. There was that time we had chartered an airplane to complete a jag. His coming was an oasis in this dreary desert of futility. This very thing, an oasis. Drinkers are like that. And so Ebby is somebody that he knew from the war, and he's remembering, like, Ebby's like me. Ebby's likes to drink, and I can't believe he's sober, but he's going to come over, and I'm going to be able to drink openly with him, and it's going to be like old times. The door opened, and he stood there, fresh-skinned and glowing. There was something about his eyes. He was inexplicably different. What had happened? I pushed a drink across the table. He refused it. Disappointed but curious, I wondered what had got into the fellow. He wasn't himself, right? And so this is an old drinking buddy of Bill's, and he passes this drink over to Ebby, and he's like, nah. And Ebby's like, or Bill's like, what? And so he's asking him, come, what's this all about? I queried. He looked straight at me. Simply but smiling, he said, I've got religion. I was aghast. So that was it. Last summer, an alcoholic crackpot. Now, I suspected, a little cracked about religion. He had that starry-eyed look. Yes, the old boy was on fire all right, but bless his heart, let him rant. Besides, my gin would last longer than his preaching. So he's like, okay, this guy's, got religion. Cool, I'm going to sit here and drink my gin as he preaches at me. I know what this is going to be like. But it says, but he did no ranting. In a matter-of-fact way, he told how two men had appeared in court, persuading the judge to suspend his commitment. They had told of a simple religious idea and a practical program of action. And so this, was before, the fellowship and the program of Alcoholics Anonymous was born, because these are our founders. And so this was the Oxford group. And so it was this religious group that had some similar tenets. And so, but what he says is that he didn't do ranting. What he did instead is he shared his experience. And so it goes on to say, that was 2 months ago, and the result was self-evident. It worked. He had come to pass his experience along to me, if I cared to have it. I was shocked, but interested. Certainly, I was interested. I had to be, for I was hopeless. He talked for hours. Childhood memories rose before me. I could almost hear the sound of the preacher's voice as I sat on still Sundays way over there on the hillside. There was that proffered temperance pledge I never signed, my grandfather's good-natured contempt of some church folk and their doings, his insistence that the spheres really had their music, but his denial of the preacher's right to tell him how he must listen, his fearlessness as he spoke of these things just before he died. These recollections welled up from the past. They made me swallow hard. And right, so he's remembering his experience with religion, and he's having all of these kind of flashbacks. That wartime day in old Winchester Cathedral came back again. So that's like right where we were back at the beginning of his story. I had always believed in a power greater than myself. I had often pondered these things. I was not an atheist. Few people really are, for that means blind faith in the strange proposition that this universe originated in a cipher and aimlessly rushes nowhere. My intellectual heroes, the chemists, the astronomers, even the evolutionists, suggested vast laws and forces at work. Despite contrary indications, I had little doubt that a mighty purpose and rhythm underlay all. How could there be so much of precise and immutable law and no intelligence? I simply had to believe in a spirit of the universe who knew neither time nor limitation, but that was as far as I had gone, right? And so he's just kind of, again, saying that he's not had the best experience with religion. He is like, I'm not an atheist. I do believe that there's something, but there has to be a reason all this exists. But still definitely has like some prejudice towards what Eddie is about to tell him. With ministers in the world's religions, I parted right there. When they talked of a God personal to me, who is love, superhuman strength, and direction, I became irritated and my mind snapped shut against such a theory. To Christ I conceded the certainty of a great man, not too closely followed by those who claimed him. His moral teaching most excellent. For myself, I had adopted those parts which seemed convenient and not too difficult. The rest I disregarded. And this is an important thing because when we start to realize like our powerlessness and we are moving on to step 2, we learn that like this is perfect for where I need to be. Like he's basically saying like he has an idea, he's got some prejudices towards whatever, but he's still like taking what he has, right? And so he's disregarding the rest. The wars which had been fought, the burnings and chicanery that religious dispute had facilitated, made me sick. I honestly doubted whether, on balance, the religions of mankind had done any good. Judging from what I had seen in Europe and since, the power of God in human affairs was negligible. The brotherhood of man a grim jest. If there was a devil, he seemed the boss universal, and he certainly had me. But my friend sat before me, and he made the point-blank declaration that God had done for him what he could not do for himself. His human will had failed. Doctors had pronounced him incurable. Society was about to lock him up. Like myself, he admitted complete defeat. Then he had, in effect, been raised from the dead, suddenly taken from the scrap heap to a level of life better than he had ever known. Had this power originated in him? Obviously, it had not. There had been no more power in him than there was in me at that minute, and this was none at all. So he's starting to, again, like he's reconciling his idea of God. And honestly, he's like, I don't really like the idea of God. And he's like, if there's a devil, like that, he's running things, and he's definitely running me. But he sees in Ebby, because what Ebby is saying in his experience, because they have a similar experience, right? That like God did something in Ebby that he couldn't do for himself. Because again, Ebby is this guy that drank exactly like Bill did. Like they were, drinking buddies. And so, and then again, he was about to be locked up in the same asylum, basically. But something had happened. And so he's starting to see and recognize like this power, didn't originate in Ebby. And there had to be no more power in Ebby right now than there was in me. And so he says that floored me. It began to look as though religious people were right after all. Here was something at work in a human heart which had done the impossible. My ideas about miracles were drastically revised right then. Never mind the musty past. Here sat a miracle directly across the kitchen table. He shouted great tidings. And what he's saying is that, like, he is seeing from someone else's experience that maybe all of those, ideas about religion or God or whatever it was, that maybe there was something to that, right? He's not being preached at for once. He's actually listening to somebody who had the same experience that he had. And he's starting to have this, instant bond, right? And he's intrigued by that. And that's why, as a recovered alcoholic, we are to go out and carry this message because we have something that nobody else does when it comes to the suffering alcoholic. He says, I saw that my friend was much more than inwardly reorganized. He was on a different footing. His roots grasped a new soil. Despite the living example of my friend, there remained in me the vestiges of my old prejudice. The word God still aroused a certain antipathy. When the thought was expressed that there might be a God personal to me, this feeling was intensified. He's like, I don't like it. He's like, nah, I don't like that. I didn't like the idea. I could go for such conceptions as creative intelligence, universal mind, or spirit of nature, but I resisted the thought of a czar of the heavens. However loving his sway might be, I have since talked with scores of men who felt the same way. My friend suggested what then seemed a novel idea. He said, why don't you choose your own conception of God? And this becomes a turning point in Bill's story and in a lot of our stories, right? Because a lot of us have, whatever past or whatever experience or whatever prejudices with God or this idea of God, and we've said it doesn't work. I'm pissed off at it. I don't like it. And so Ebby presents him with this new idea of why don't you choose your own conception? And that was, this almost remarkable idea for Bill. And he says, that statement hit me hard. It melted the icy intellectual mountain in whose shadow I had lived and shivered many years. I stood in the sunlight at last. It was only a matter of being willing to believe in a power greater than myself. Nothing more was required of me to make my beginning, right? Like this is him having, taking step 2, like all it is that I'm willing to believe. And that's all that's required. I saw that growth could start from that point. Upon a foundation of complete willingness, I might build what I saw in my friend. Would I have it? Of course I would. So he's, seeing like my foundation is this willingness. And I really do, I want what my friend has. He is no longer, you know, delusional about his drinking. Like he is like, it is screwed me. Like it is not good. And I want what this guy has. Thus, I was convinced that God is concerned with us humans when we want him enough. At long last, I saw, I felt, I believed. Scales of pride and prejudice fell from my eyes. A new world came into view. The real significance of my experience in the cathedral burst upon me. For a brief moment, I had needed and wanted God. There had been a humble willingness to have him with me, and he came. But soon the sense of his presence had been blotted out by worldly clamors, mostly those within myself. And so it had been ever since, how blind I had been. At the hospital, I was separated from alcohol for the last time. Treatment seemed wise, for I showed signs of delirium tremens. There I humbly offered myself to God as I then understood him, and to do with me as he would. I placed myself unreservedly under his care and direction. I admitted for the first time that of myself I was nothing, that without him I was lost. I ruthlessly faced my sins and became willing to have my newfound friend take them away, root and branch. I have not had a drink since. Right. So this part where he's, humbly offering himself to God, he's taking step 3, right? He's, admitting that his ways aren't working, and he's asking God really to direct him, right? In step 3, it says we made a decision to turn our will and our life over to the care of God as we understood him. He's turning himself over to God as he is now understanding him. And kind of, where he goes into to have this newfound friend, this newfound understanding of God, to take away the stuff that has been blocking me. And that's getting into, step 6 and 7. My schoolmate visited me, and I finally acquainted him with my problems and deficiencies. We made a list of people I had hurt or toward whom I had felt resentment. I expressed my entire willingness to approach these individuals, admitting my wrong. So there we're seeing, step 4 actually happen. He's doing this inventory. This list of people that he had hurt is something that came up. It's going to be something that he uses in 8, where he's expressing his willingness to approach them and admit his wrong. Never was I to be critical of them. I was to write all such matters to the utmost of my ability, right? And this is the same thing that we're doing here when we're doing, making those amends. Like, I'm not there to criticize them. This is exactly what Bill did. I was to test my thinking of the new God consciousness within. Common sense would thus become uncommon sense, right? He's learning that his common sense is going to be different. It's not going to be what he's used to, his common sense, because his drinking got him where he did. I was to sit quietly when in doubt, asking only for direction and strength to meet my problems as he would have me. It sounds familiar because it's step 11. Never was I to pray for myself except as my request bore on my usefulness to others. Then only might I expect to receive, but that would be in great measure. My friend promised when these things were done, I would enter upon a new relationship with my Creator, that I would have the elements of a way of living which answered all my problems. Belief in the power of God plus willingness, honesty, and humility to establish and maintain the new order of things were the essential requirements. Simple but not easy, a price had to be paid. It meant destruction of self-centeredness. I must turn in all things to the Father of light who presides over us all. These were revolutionary and drastic proposals, but the moment I fully accepted them, the effect was electric. There was a sense of victory followed by such peace and serenity as I had never known. There was utter confidence. I felt lifted up, as though the great clean wind of a mountaintop blew through and through. God comes to most men gradually, but his impact on me was sudden and profound. For a moment, I was alarmed and called my friend, the doctor, to ask if I were still sane. He listened in wonder as I talked. Finally, he shook his head, saying, "Something has happened to you I don't understand. But you have had better hang on to it. Anything is better than the way you were." The good doctor now sees many men who have such experiences. He knows that they are real. And this is a cool moment too, because, in the doctor's opinion, Dr. William Silkworth is talking about how, he has treated so many men and women like Bill and, really truly thought that there was nothing he could do. He realized that there was nothing that he could do as a doctor. And he alludes to this part of Bill's story when he's talking about, he says how like we're on the firing line and there's something that's happening in them that is out of what we as doctors can do. And he says it much more nicely, but, he's witnessing this in Bill and he's telling him like, I don't know what's happening to you, but hold on to it. And so while I lay in the hospital, the thought came that there were thousands of hopeless alcoholics who might be glad to have what had been so freely given me. Perhaps I could help some of them. They in turn might work with others. And this again is step 12. And this is where, Bill goes to the doctor and is like, hey, like, can I go talk to another patient of yours in this hospital? My friend had emphasized the absolute necessity of demonstrating these principles in all my affairs. Particularly was it imperative to work with others as he had worked with me. Faith without works was dead, he said, and how appallingly true for the alcoholic. For if an alcoholic failed to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice for others, he could not survive the certain trials and low spots ahead. If he did not work, he would surely drink again, and if he drank, he would surely die. Then faith would be dead indeed. With us, it is just like that. And you know how in the preface, it talks about how this is the basic text and how we talk about this as a textbook. For me, a textbook is something that sometimes you have to go back and reference other pages. And in my 10th step promises, I have pages 14 and 15 written on here right after that line that says keeps in fit spiritual condition, because this is how we keep in fit spiritual condition is that little paragraph that I just read. My wife and I abandoned ourselves with enthusiasm to the idea of helping other alcoholics to a solution of their problems. It was fortunate for my old business associates remained skeptical for a year and a half, during which I found little work. I was not too well at the time and was plagued by waves of self-pity and resentment. This sometimes nearly drove me back to drink, but I soon found that when all other measures failed, work with another alcoholic would save the day. Many times I've gone to my old hospital in despair. On talking to a man there, I would be amazingly lifted up and set on my feet. It is a design for living that works in rough going. And I love that, he talks about this, right? Because it's not this all of a sudden I work the steps and it's like, ta-da, like Nina is a new person and she doesn't ever think about drinking. But, he talks about how like he would have self-pity and resentment and that it nearly drove him back to drink. But what he because the sanity has been returned, he was able to make the choice to go and work with another alcoholic, right? So we commenced to make many fast friends, and a fellowship has grown up among us, of which it is a wonderful thing to feel a part. The joy of living we really have, even under pressure and difficulty. I have seen hundreds of families set their feet in the path that really goes somewhere. Have seen the most impossible domestic situations righted, feuds and bitterness of all sorts wiped out. I've seen men come out of asylums and resume a vital place in the lives of their families and communities. Business and professional men have regained their standing. There's scarcely any form of trouble and misery which has not been overcome among us. In one Western city and its environs, there are thousands of us and our families. We meet frequently so that newcomers may find the fellowship they seek. At these informal gatherings, one may often see from 50 to 200 persons. We are growing in numbers and power. And it has a footnote that says in 2013, AA is composed of approximately 114,600 groups. And he calls out something really specific in this. He says that they meet frequently so that newcomers may find the fellowship. They're meeting to find that newcomer. An alcoholic in his cups is an unlovely creature. Our struggles with them are variously strenuous, comic, and tragic. One poor chap committed suicide in my home. He could not or would not see our way of life. There is, however, a vast amount of fun about it all. I suppose some would be shocked at our seeming worldliness and levity, but just underneath there's deadly earnestness. Faith has to work 24 hours a day in and through us, or we perish. Most of us feel we need look no further for utopia. We have it with us right here and now. Each day, my friend's simple talk in our kitchen multiplies itself in a widening circle of peace on earth and goodwill to men. Bill W., co-founder of AA, died January 24th, 1971. So such a cool story, right? Because it just really, and the way that Bill tells his story is also how we tell our story. What happened, what it was like before we found this, what happened, how we worked the steps, how we found the steps, and then what it's like now. And, he does call out that, there's this guy that committed suicide in his home. Like, it doesn't, there are people, that it doesn't work for, and it talks about that in how it works. And that's always really, really hard. But there is so much that we get to see and so much beauty that comes out of it. And then again, he kind of ends it with like, faith has to work 24 hours a day in and through us, or we perish. Like, this isn't something that, I get to learn and then graduate from, which I always wanted, right? Because I wanted to graduate from AA. As a result, it's just so cool. Like, I truly feel like my life now, as a result of working these steps, it is utopia, and it's just beyond anything that I could have ever imagined. So these are promises that are in the book. Beyond Bill's story, they're in the steps too. So.
Thank you for listening to the Alcoholics Anonymous Big Book Workshop. This recording is not associated with any AA group or AA World Services. Find out more at ladiesbigbook.com.